Okay, Itamekskanatoni, good morning. It is an overcast and cool Saturday morning, July 14th, 2018, in the lunar cycle Okonokist Otsitsitspi, when the Saskatoon berries ripen. And I've just pulled in here to one of the access points to what's called Bull Trail Park. Pretty much all of the coulees north of Whoop-Up Drive, south of the high-level bridge on the west side. And yeah, this particular access point is just north of Whoop-Up. If you're interested in coming over here and checking things out, I thought today we'd take a walk down into the coulee and look at some of the plants, what's going on. I had a couple of requests recently for some more edible medicinal plant tutorial type videos now that the season's changing up, so we'll do a little bit of that this morning. Might as well start right here because we might not see it elsewhere. You can see we have a good crop of rhombic leaf and plain sunflower out here on the coulee rim. Okay, nice big sunflowers. Well, big for southern Alberta, big for the plains, right? These do produce an edible seed like all sunflowers, but they're very small seeds, and I have harvested them before. What I do is I wait until early winter when I see the birds starting to harvest them. Then I just clip a portion of the stem, you know, with the seed head intact, put it in a brown paper sack, wait for it to dry up, and then it starts dropping the seeds on its own. So you can just shake it in the bag, drop all of its seeds, and go to town munching them. Now, these aren't going to taste like your your sunflower, your commercial sunflower seeds. Well, they kind of have the same taste, but not much of the same texture because it's much more shell than nut when it comes to these little prairie guys. But in a pinch, you know, gives you a little bit of protein, and it's completely digestible. I just eat the shells and all, you know. I just munch the whole thing, or throw them into a smoothie, you know, blend it up with a good smoothie blender. You don't even notice there's shells. So we're gonna head down into this coulee, see what we can run into. I'm interested in particular in getting some Saskatoon berries for myself. This is one of the coulees where I normally pick every year. Probably going to get some currants as well, but we'll see what else is out here. This coulee, of course, is very famous. In October 1870, there was an attack on a Blackfoot camp on the other side of West Lethbridge. The other side, the kind of the far, what would it be? Kind of the far west side of West Lethbridge. There was an attack on a Blackfoot camp made by some Cree in October 1870, and the Blackfoot famously had groups all up and down the river, and everybody gathered together and chased the Cree across the prairie, across the west side, and ultimately down into this coulee where they were completely rooted, like annihilated. There was some Cree that got away swimming across the river, but a lot of carnage in this particular coulee. And there's a reason for, you know, the strength of that response. One thing, of course, it was a response, it was a defense. But on top of that, you know, earlier in that year, in January, the U.S. Army had really come down on a Blackfoot camp on the Marias River and wiped everybody out, just did a massacre. So the tribes are still kind of reeling from that, and when they were going to have to defend themselves, they're going to do it with a heavy hand, right? Okay, so here we got another couple of plants. Might as well show it. We've got some sage, Ninakaksimi, man sage, which is a traditional sage used in Blackfoot ceremonies as a cleanser. You know, Blackfoot elders sometimes laugh at at how sage is treated in a sacred respect by some of the other tribes, because here the tradition was that it was the toilet paper, right? Sage's toilet paper. Stempsis is ass wipe to begin with. But as an extension, it's a cleanser, right? So if somebody is spiritually, you know, unclean, like they've been exposed to death and mourning and such, the sage is used to remove that as well. Here we have yarrow, Ochtoksoki in Blackfoot. And this plant is a world-renowned anti-inflammatory, and I've seen it work. I brought my students out to Chief Mountain one year, and just starting into the hike, one of the ladies fell, tripped, and bumped her knee, and her knee swelled up really big. We just took the flower head and the leaves off of some yarrow that were right nearby where she fell, chewed them up, made a poultice, put it on her knee, and no kidding, 10 minutes later the swelling had gone right down. So that's what it's known for, is reducing swelling, and you just make a poultice out of it to do that. All right, let's continue down the path and see what else we find. So I think I've gone far enough down into the coulee now. There's a lot of berries up this way that I passed, that I noted, you know, good plants close to the trail that I can access. But I wanted to come down a little further just to see what the, you know, plant situation was down here, whether there are different species represented and that kind of thing. Really, there's not. I'll point out a couple of species here, a few species. This is kind of probably this area here was a little bit disturbed at one point, and so you got some disturbance type plants growing here, including this wild mustard pennycress, whose seeds you could definitely eat on right now, get a little bit of that mustard taste. This tall plant that you see here, that looks like a sage, is in fact a member of that family, but it's not very sagey in terms of its smell and that kind of thing. This is absinthe, right? This is the plant that was introduced here to produce the hallucinogenic liquor that's now highly illegal around the world. But yeah, it still grows wild here. We have also Canada thistle, right? Just starting to come into bloom, this Canada thistle. And like all true thistles, Canada thistle roots are edible. The only problem is you definitely need to cook them. And I know this from experience. First time I ever ate a thistle root, you know, I just uprooted the plant and went to town eating on it, and I got violently sick for 2 days. And it's because there's a bacteria that lives, you know, in symbiosis with the root, and if you don't kill off that bacteria, that's the thing that makes you sick, right? So you gotta cook those roots before you eat them. Don't be doing that raw. Here's a plant that I know I talked about on a previous video, but doesn't hurt to revisit it. This is skunk brush sumac. It's one of the common coulee slope plants, and it produces these red berries. And these red berries are really high in citric acid and vitamin C, you know. Tastes like, tastes like a lemon Sour Patch Kid, you know, Sour Patch Kid candy, something like that. But you take a bunch of these berries, you throw them in some water, you got lemonade. They have a seed to them. It's really impossible, you know, or not worth trying to eat them and eat around the seed. So I just eat the whole thing, seed and all, crunch them up. Seed's not too hard. But yeah, they taste really good, and great source of vitamin C. I haven't figured out, other than, you know, freezing, I haven't figured out a good way to preserve those berries. They're one of those kind of berries, almost like bullberries. You just got to enjoy them in the season. And here's a very important plant that most people here don't know, but they should. This is called, I don't know, it's variously named, but I think the most common English name is Indian breadroot. And in Blackfoot, this is called moss, which really means root, right? But this is the prototypical root. And you can see it's got this almost like a lupine palmate leaf. It's got 5 leaflets in the palm, just like the 5 fingers of your hand. And it's got these big brushy clover type flowers. But you dig down, and in underground is a big bulbous, nice starchy root. It's got a dark skin on it that peels off real easy, and then you got a perfect starch root. This is the old time potatoes, right? Some people call them Indian turnips, this kind of thing. If you read like Blackfoot ethnographies and stuff from the turn of the century, you'll hear Indian turnip a lot being used in those books. And this is the plant they're referring to. So when you go to, you know, traditional Blackfoot ceremonies today, you're often fed roast beef, baked potato, you know, baked carrots, and some chicken eggs, hard-boiled eggs. These are all substitutes of original traditional foods, and this was the potato. So this was a core staple food that every household would use throughout the year. The ladies this time of year in the summer, especially during those rains, you know, during the last lunar cycle, I mean, that's where you got to take advantage of the environment. When we're having the rains and the ground is moist and easy to dig, that's when you dig for these roots. These roots go fairly far down, right? So in the past, you know, they were just digging sticks that were used to uproot these. It wasn't an easy chore. I always have my students from Ghana studies during the summer come out and practice digging a couple of them themselves so they could appreciate what it was that the ancestors did, because those ladies had to dig hundreds of them so that they'd have a good store of them to last through the winter as a starch, as a basic carbohydrate to fuel the body, you know. So this was a very important plant, moss. Let's continue. Go check out some of the shadier areas, you know, below these chokecherry bushes and such in the coulees. You're going to find a different complex of plants, including these big leaf, what some people call wild rhubarb. These are common burdock plants. You can usually find evidence of the old stems, like this one here, okay, with the old burdock seeds on top. These plants produce a really nice vegetable root. You have to get them before they're mature enough to be sending up a flower head, though, because once that comes up, like with most plants, when they put out their flowers, the root gets too fibrous. It's a lot of cleavers in here. This really sticky plant here. Only thing I've ever heard with cleavers is their use as kind of a hair rinse, you know, a cleaning and conditioning kind of hair rinse. I used it a couple of times back in the old days when I had hair. What else do we got here? Very small, not yet matured up yet. You see these kind of mint, like it's a member of the mint family. This is catnip that's coming up here. Just like the stuff that you would give your cats to drive them nuts. And of course up here we have the berries that I'm gonna start harvesting. So right in here we got golden currants, nice, ripe, ready to go golden currants. We actually have also out here, we got red currants. In fact, I think we have some examples of that up here. Red and black currants. They're all good. They're all yum. Okay. Here's some red currants here. In the Blackfoot language, they're called Saxi Baksinisiman, which means the Sarsi gooseberry. So they're categorized as they should be with the gooseberries. And here, of course, is my main target for the morning for my harvest, which is Saskatoon Okonoki in Blackfoot. And this is basically our wild blueberry up here. If you're not from Montana, Alberta, this is our wild blueberry, and this is another one of the really core staple foods in the traditional Blackfoot diet. Thousands of these berries were harvested, and easily this is one berry that's easily preserved in the sun. Just lay it out in the sun and it dries up and it rehydrates really good. So this berry was used year-round, you know, as a source of key essential vitamins and such. It's the core fruit that was harvested in Blackfoot territory, aside from maybe choke cherries, but this one is the number one, Okonoki. It's considered one of the 4 foods that give long life. So I'm gonna pick some of these bad boys. Working the coulee slopes, the smart way to pick is to get underneath the plants and pick upward. That way you don't have to be bending down, you know, to go at plants on this side of the coulee slope. Just some common sense stuff, you know. Ideally, the time to come and engage in this harvest is morning time, right? So you get out here early, pick while it's cool, and then, you know, as things start warming up, go back to your shelter and get in the shade and do some other work where it's better to be under cover, you know. So morning time is really the ideal harvest time, and this is really ultimately what the Sundance encampment, which is the big annual ceremonial encampment, this is the phenological event that triggers that, you know, brings everybody together near the best berry sources, and it's really a big harvesting camp as well as a giant family reunion. There's that hawk. There's a couple of them. I saw that hawk earlier. But anyway, yeah, getting back to Akokatsin is more than just ceremony. It's a big harvest camp. You know, big family reunion, big harvest camp, and it keeps everybody nice because you're involved in ceremony. You're not going to be. It's not the time to be haggling over whose berry bushes are whose. But you know, even today, you get people that they keep their berry places secret. You know, and for good reason, because it's hard to find good berry sources. They seem to be pretty strongly connected to us. The more we harvest, the more the plants produce berries. And so around Lethbridge, it's hard to find really good berry sources because nobody really harvests. Well, I didn't get a ton, but I've got some. I got somebody that's messaging me wanting to meet with me, so I'm going to take off. Ideally, you know, if I had it my way, I would be able to spend from this point on through the rest of the harvest season. I'd be able to come out here, you know, at least an hour or two every morning to pick. But that's that's an unrealistic ideal with all of the other pressures and commitments. But I'm going to try to get out here as much as I can. Now that we're in this lunar cycle, it's time to really get the resources while they're available, because those windows of opportunity will be closing before we know it.